we're going to have another great discussion on one of the SDG goals and how individuals are contributing their quota towards the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. Well, we all know that the future of humanity and our planet lies in the hands, and it also lies in the hands of today's youth. And so it is very important for all of us to contribute our quota towards the development of these individuals, so of course the youth, so that they can have a better future in handling the affairs of their communities as well as at the national level. There's a young lady who is doing so much in terms of helping and empowering girls. For the SDG goal 5, it looks at how we can achieve equality for women and girls, as well as look at how we can empower young ladies and girls and women at all levels, from a national, from a community, as well as at individual levels. And so we are using this platform to highlight the contributions that some people are making towards the achievement of these various targets under the Sustainable Development Goals. To help me on our discussion today, which is the role of individuals in achieving Sustainable Development Goal 5, is Miss Aisha Addo, who is the founder of Power to Girls Foundation. She will be telling us a bit of herself, and then we delve deeper into the conversation. Thank you and welcome once again. I would plead with all of you, for those who are watching us at the moment, to share the link, share your views as we go on with the discussion, so that we can have all of you join and be part of the conversation. All right, Aisha, welcome and thank you so much for joining me here on CSR Lense.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to dig deeper into this conversation, and thank you for creating the space and the opportunity for me to do so.
Great. How long have you been in Ghana? I know you do not live in Ghana, so how long have you been around?
Oh, right now I've been here for 6 months now.
Oh, wow.
It's been very interesting. Yeah. So yeah, I've been back now for 6 months.
Is this the longest period you've been around?
To be quite honest, yes. Since I left, this has been the longest that I've been around. And yeah, it's been a very interesting learning experience. To be quite honest, so I'm really enjoying it.
Great. Now let's talk a bit about you. Who is Aisha Addo? I know. Well, I know you, but I'm sure there are a couple of people who have probably not followed what you do. So could you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Aisha Addo, like you mentioned, and I consider myself a social entrepreneur with the focus on creating safe spaces for girls and women. So what that means is that every aspect of the work that I do is directly related to women empowerment or the advancement of women and girls. So be it creating safe spaces or creating economic empowerment opportunities, or essentially just connecting women and creating programs or resources that advance women and their roles in society. So that's essentially who I am, and what my work is centered around. I'm also an entrepreneur, so a lot of my work, although focuses on women and girls, I also have the things that I do on the side. So I consult on social profit businesses, as well as consult for also as well.
Okay, great. So how did the dream? How has it been for you so far? I mean, since you started this journey, your social entrepreneurship journey, before we delve deeper into the course that you have.
Yeah, it's been very interesting because I actually graduated as an accounting student. So it's always very interesting to me when I get asked this question about how it's been so far, because it wasn't necessarily something that, in all honesty, I got up and I said I'm going to do. It's just something that I felt like I was drawn to as a result of some of the main issues, or like the present issues in society that I wanted to solve. So my entrepreneurship journey, and the reason why I say that I'm a social entrepreneur, is because my entrepreneurship journey is always connected to a social cause. So it's been very interesting. But I think one of the things that makes it worthwhile is how rewarding and impactful it is. That my work does not only affect me, but it affects everyone else around me. So for me, that's like the highlights of it, and that's one of the things that I enjoy thoroughly.
Now let's talk about power to girls. First of all, why did you choose to do anything on Sustainable Development Goal 5?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, Power to Girls, which is the organization that I started, um, started when I started that organization when I was 17, 18. And it started because I had just moved to Canada at that time, and there wasn't a lot of spaces for myself as a young Black girl to go and, ask questions or talk to someone. Like, the community was it was very close knit. And as much as there were programming for girls, there wasn't necessarily programming that was catered to Black girls. And even to take it a step further, catered to immigrant girls. So I started the organization because that was some of the things that I needed when I moved to Canada. And I realized that there was other girls as well within my immediate community that was craving that space and was craving that close knitness as well. So I started as, like, just coming together with 6 girls, having conversations. I was learning from them as much as they were learning from me, and we were sharing, experiences. And it was very interesting because we recognized that there was a huge disparity among, the issues and the resources that were available to girls. But then, more importantly, there was a huge disparity when it came to problem solving for Black girls or for marginalized girls. So that was really how Power to Girls, started, and then that's how we've been able to grow it, because we focus on a very specific target market, which is Black and marginalized girls. So it was very interesting, and I think as the SDG goals, was developed and it started evolving, for us, it was a no-brainer for us to focus on, SDG Goal 5 and also SDG Goal 4, because I think we cannot necessarily talk about gender equality without talking about quality of education, and the access that girls have, and in some cases do not have across the world. So it was a no-brainer for us. And I think, our work touches on some of the other SDGs, but our main focus really is on gender equality and quality education.
Great. So how many what kind of programs do you have, if I must ask here, what kind of programs do you have so far that is helping you to achieve your targets and your goals that you set for the foundation?
Yeah, absolutely. So our main programming is divided into 4 main things. So we tackle leadership. So we provide girls with, personal development programs, personal development resources. The second one is mental health and wellness. So one of the key things is really ensuring that as we are providing the program, we also take into account the mental health and the mental well-being of the girls that we work with. The third thing that we work on is mentorship. So essentially, what that is how do we connect girls to resources and role models, for them to be able to think outside of the box, and for them to be able to tap into the skills of women that have been there before them. So for us, like, mentorship is like really vital, and it's really important because we've learned that, like, you cannot necessarily be what you cannot see, and if you do not get that representation and you do not get that access, things will be different, definitely, when you do have that access. And then the last thing that we do is entrepreneurship and tech. And essentially what that is that we provide girls with skills and resources for them to be able to start their own businesses or ventures that initially will provide them with economic empowerment and economic freedom. So that's essentially like the 4 things that we touch on. And then the tech aspect is really just providing basic tech skills for them to be able to gain that 21st century skills, but then also for them to be competitive when they go into, their journeys of life, or when they go into, the workforce. So those are the main things that our organization focuses on, and what our programs are centered around.
Great. One of the things I like to always look at is some of the things you observe before selecting your programs, right? Because some of these things help you, inform you on what kind of direction you need to go. Now, with these ladies that you work with, what were some of the things that you observed that informed the decision to look at things from these angles?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So for us, we're looking at what we like to call the holistic aspect of a girl. So we look at it from a point of like, what are some of the things that a girl is going to need throughout her journeys in life, right? So from the time that you are in elementary school to when you're in SS, to when you're in university or college, like there's so many different aspects of things that you're going to need. So we look at it from that point of view. The other aspects too is that, like, in order for you to be able to succeed or thrive in, let's say, entrepreneurship, in tech, in business, whatever it is, you have to go through a period of personal development. And that is one of the core things that for us is really important, because if you've not been able to identify who you are, how you want to show up in the world, and you have not challenged some of the stereotypes and the things that you've been told about yourself, then you're going to go into the world really and truly thinking about all those other people and all those other things as opposed to your personal journey, right? So that is part of the reason why in every aspect of the work that we do, personal development is very important, because you have to take time up, you have to have time set for your personal development, for you to figure out who you are. And I actually believe that this is not even something that is just for young girls or kids, but generally for everyone, right? You have to be able to set time apart for yourself to figure out who you are, to figure out what your purpose is, to figure out how you show up in the world, how you want to show up in the world, the changes that you want to make, as well as, like, just how you want to impact the world in general. Because when you're able to identify that, then it's easier for you to go through life. So then now when you are learning skills about entrepreneurship, you're learning it with a different perspective. When you're learning things about tech, or you're learning skills like, vocational skills, whatever it may be, there's a different understanding of it. And then there's a different way that you look at it, because then now it is directly impactful for you. So that is one of the things that we realized very early on. The other aspect too is mentorship. So as much as we might feel like we can do everything by ourselves, we cannot. And mentorship is something that is really vital and very, very important. And that was what led for us as an organization to, have mentorship as one of the core things within our programming. So mentorship can happen in different ways. It's not necessarily just, an older person to a younger person, but then also that linear aspect of mentorship, which is through the peer-to-peer interactions. So that was very important for us. And throughout the pandemic, actually, that was what led us to developing a platform that will allow for girls to connect with mentors and for them to connect with each other. So think about, your Instagram or your LinkedIn, but then this is made specifically for girls to be able to have that safe online space, but then also have that, have that community that allows for them to connect with each other. So it's just all of those different experiences and all those different narratives coming together is what influences our programming. The other aspect too is that we actually have an ambassador program where the girls, we present the programs to the girls, and then they will give us direct feedback. So majority of the programming that we put together and the programming that we do is not only based off of, our personal experiences, but then also the experiences of the girls and really what is going on in their individual lives. So they're very involved and engaged throughout the process as well.
Okay, so I mean, with all these dimensions that you look at in selecting your programming, what would you say has been the? By the way, I saw a video. I think a short video of yours that was basically on a tech platform. How to get? What exactly did you seek to achieve with that?
Which one? There's a lot of
So
videos. So
I think you did one recently, which you were looking at how people, I mean, these ladies can use tech in a very safe manner. I
yes,
believe. Okay. So what did
yes.
you, I mean, what did you seek to do with achieve with that? If I may
Yeah,
ask.
so that's what I was talking about, the mentorship aspect. So it's called My Power app, which is a tech-based platform and app that essentially would allow for girls to connect with mentors. So let's say, you have mentors from, let's say journalism, tech,
Yeah.
business, all of that stuff on this platform. You're able to go on there and actually communicate with them and ask them questions about their field, about the sectors, and really get insights about who they are, when you're making decisions for your life and for yourself. But then the other aspect too is that the application allows for girls to connect with each other. So it's kind of like a social connection platform that would allow, let's say, a girl in Canada, for example, to connect with a girl in Ghana. The whole premise is to create a safer online space, but then also create a space that allows for girls to access mentors easily. One of the things that we learned from developing mentorship programs is that mentorship programs, when you're doing kind of like a one-on-one connection, can be very difficult to manage because you're dealing with people and their different timing and their different availabilities. So we thought if we're able to actually use technology to bridge that gap, then imagine
Mhm.
the impact that it's actually going to make, because then now you have a potential mentor at the tip, like at the tip of your hands. So essentially that is really what the premise of the My Power app is, and we're really excited to actually have that launching this summer. So yeah, like we're super 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 excited about that.
Right. Now let's talk about impact. For me, when I look at a lot of the programs that we have, I mean, at the various levels, impact is very important to me because, and sustainability, of course. At the end of the day, we are looking at what kind of change makers we are growing, what kind of ideas we are imparting in people, and how are these people if eventually going to also transfer that idea onto people. And so let's look at that. What has the impact been so far from your end, based on the programs that you're rolling out so far?
Yeah, that's a good question. So for us, we measure impact by a couple of things. So we measure impact by the changes that we see within the girls, and then also just some of the opportunities and resources that we're able to connect them to. So we have worked with over 500 girls across Canada and actually over 200 girls in Ghana. And majority of the things that, for us is really important is the changes that we see in them. So we've seen girls that have been able to, one, graduate high school when they've been told that they are not capable of doing that. We've seen girls actually get into universities and colleges when that they didn't feel like that was an option for them. We have seen girls with an increase in self-esteem and being able to take up leadership opportunities within their schools, within their communities. We have seen girls actually go through our programs and then come back and serve as mentors and serve as facilitators and serve as volunteers throughout
Mm-hmm.
the work. So for us, our impact is something that is very important to us. But then the flip side of it too is that our impact is not tangible, in the sense that there is the aspect of the number of girls that we've worked with and the number of girls that have gone through our programming. But then
Mm-hmm.
when I say it's not tangible, in the sense that you're not able to measure someone's increase in self-esteem, right? Like you
Yeah.
cannot put a number to it. So it is one of those things that you have to see it, and like of course we also have the girls expressing these things to us. And when someone has gained more confidence and has gained an increase in self-esteem or has gained leadership skills and abilities, it's not something that you can put a glasses on and say, oh my god, I can see it, right? It's very gradual, but then the impact that it has is long lasting, because
Mm-hmm.
once you're able to help a girl identify who she is and help her amplify her voice, the things that she's able to do is amazing. And I'll give you a perfect example. So last summer we organized a summer program. Due to the pandemic, it was actually online, and we had the absolute best of, experience. And the reason why I say that is because our programming is always in person, and then there's an aspect of our programming that is
Mhm.
very heavy on connectivity. So if, let's say, a girl comes to program and she says, I'm feeling really down today, there would be a group of girls that will come around her, give her a hug, make sure she's okay. So when the
Yeah.
pandemic hit, one of our main issues was, how are we going to be able to duplicate this experience, that is this online experience that we have, like that in this sorry this in-person experience online. So we organized our program, and we had about 60 girls signing up to the summer programming, and then we had about 45 of them staying throughout the entire program. So about
Mhm.
15 of them fell off throughout. But one of the things that was really important for us was that we recognized that at the end of the program, the girls were able to connect with each other. And one of the things that was consistent across all of their feedback was that I really wish that this was in person, because I would love to see some of these girls that I've never met before. And for us, we recognize that, wow, we've been able to duplicate that same safe space that we normally create in person online, and that's not something that is easy to do. Some of the girls throughout that camp have stayed with Power to Girls throughout, and today two of them are actually hosts of a podcast that Power to Girls is sponsoring, for them to be able to reach more girls and for them to be able to share their personal experiences of the things that young girls experience. So for us, it's not just about the impact, but it's about the opportunities that we create, and it's also about the talents that we cultivate, because we recognize that there are girls that are capable of so much more, and sometimes it's just a matter of creating that opportunity for them. So yeah, our impact spans across, and it's something that is not, it's not just a one-time thing, but it's something that is reoccurring and follows them throughout their journeys.
Aisha, I mean, listening to you, that of course, and that's what the SDG Goal 5 talks about, empowerment. Let's demystify the negative impressions people have concerning empowerment. A lot of the time when we talk about empowering women, it's almost as if you are asking them to stand against maybe the men, or stand against society and all that. How do we demystify empowerment?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I'm so happy that you asked that, because I always like to share that we have this idea that the empowerment of women is at the detriment of men. But it shouldn't be so, because when you look at society from all aspects, we have to ensure that everyone is represented and everyone feels heard and is heard, and their voices are amplified in that regard. So for me, it's always important to have that conversation with specifically, like men around what empowerment means and what empowerment is. I do also have to say, though, that we've not done a really good job at educating and empowering men, as much as we have women.
With
And the
women?
reason why I say that is because I always have this conversation with folks, and something that consistently comes up is the fact that we are raising up very strong, empowered women that would have to be in a world with men, because we all coexist in the same world, and we've not done as much of a job with the men as we have with the women. And this is not to negate the fact that women, like, more spaces, or like more experiences and stuff are created for women, but it's really to understand that it's the little things that a lot of times we don't have, the little conversations that we don't have with men, that ends up becoming a huge thing in the future. So topics like consent, understanding consent and understanding what it means when a woman says no, and
Yeah.
respecting that a woman has anatomy over her body and over the things that she chooses to do. So that is one. The other aspect to, and this is more from like an African context, is that I recognize that a lot of people, and this is not even just men, a lot of people in general
Mhm.
misunderstand what feminism is.
Yeah.
People don't understand that the fight of equity, and the fight, the conversation around empowerment and the conversation around creating safe spaces for women is not really a gender thing, but it's more of a systematic thing. So looking around you, you recognize that the fight is not really against an individual or a man. The fight is against patriarchy. It's against the systems. It's against all of those different things that have been put in place to systematically oppress women and systematically, and and in certain countries, systematically oppress people of color and people that do not look or talk a certain way. So when that conversation comes up, I always like to challenge people to think about it from a different perspective. Why are you so offended by the idea of a woman, being in a leadership position? Why are you so threatened by the idea of a woman knowing her worth and knowing what she brings to the table? A woman that is not afraid to speak her mind. Why does that threaten you? Because then when you do that, going back to what I said earlier about doing that personal reflection, you recognize that there is a lot of toxic masculinity and a lot of things that you have come to put on that you think is what a man is supposed to be like. That in itself is systematic and it's actually very toxic. So when we really go deep to have these conversations and we challenge the narratives that we've heard about ourselves and the narratives that we've heard about how we're supposed to show up, we recognize that there's really a lot of work to do. And empowering women doesn't necessarily take away from me as an individual. And if I was a man, it wouldn't take away from who I am as a man either, because a woman that is empowered is going to ensure that every aspect of her community and everyone else that is around her is empowered too, and also has access to the same resources. Of course, it's life, so that means that there's always going to be some bad apples. But I think it's important to recognize that when we talk about feminism or we talk about empowerment, it is not to take away from the man in any way, shape, or form. Because one of the things that I believe is that as individuals, there are certain things that are innate to us that no one else can take away from us, right? So no one can take away Aisha from, like, I always say this to folks, is that, like, I am very self-aware of who I am, and you not liking me or you not agree with my values, or it doesn't necessarily take away from me. So instead of us always being so defensive and being offended by the word feminism or by women speaking up, and ask yourself, why am I so upset about this? Like, why is this hurting my ego? Why am I, why should I be upset about the fact that a woman knows her worth? Why should I be upset about the fact that a woman has anatomy over her body and is telling me no? Like, you get what I'm saying? So there's a lot to unpack there when we have this conversation, because I find that a lot of people really misunderstand what the fight is about. And they take it up and make it a fight against the genders, and it's really not that. Because let's even take it a step further and think about it from a diverse perspective. Being in an office where, let's say, you're working in a company that, let's say, creates pads, right? And you're creating sanitary pads for women. Everyone there is a man. Let's just take that into account. First off, you don't bleed, so you don't necessarily understand the experiences of women and the things that go on when a woman is on her period. So do you think that if you are designing products for women, you're going to be able to articulately do that without being called out? No, because you have to have that representation. So I think we just have to think about it from a different perspective and recognize that if someone says that they are feminist, or someone says that they believe in, the empowerment of women, it doesn't necessarily automatically mean that they are against men, or they are, they don't like men, or men are evil. No, it's actually quite contrary. It means that they're fighting against a system that has been put in place to oppress women, and actually significantly also oppress men, because the system in itself perpetuates toxic masculinity and doesn't allow men to live their free selves and their free lives. So
let me
Everyone should
find
do
out.
them.
Yeah, let me find out from you. I mean, about this whole empowerment thing and how the SDG Goal 5 presents it, especially for the targets, right?
Mhm.
Now, do you think that even as women who are trying to push this agenda, we also have a bit of misunderstanding or misrepresentation of what the agenda, at least from the United Nations perspective, is?
Absolutely, absolutely. And this is the thing that I've come to understand, right? Because so let's take it back to, I'm going to use the word feminism. And I know I realize that within a Ghanaian context, the word feminism is something that people hate a lot.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
it always starts, a bash. Um,
yes.
people always
It
assume.
means that they have a description for it. It means you are all over the place.
But you see, that is not what it is. So let's actually take it back a couple of years, and really the underlining thing of what feminism is. So
Yeah.
feminism, the feminist movement started as a way for white women to gain access to employment.
Hmm.
So during the war, the men went off to war and the women ended up in the factories, because they had to take care of their families and the economy had to run. So the women were deployed into the factories and doing all of these things. And what ended up happening was when the men came back from war, the women were then fired and asked to go back to the kitchen and, in a way, go back home.
Yeah.
So the women then rebelled and said, no, we want to work. We know we're capable of doing this job because when the men were not around, we were doing it. So they started this movement as a way of getting equal access to employment. And as time went on, it started, it extended to getting equal access to voting, getting equal access to all these different things. But this
Hmm.
is the caveat that a lot of people don't understand. This was a movement of white women. When they were having this whole movement, black women were already working because black women were already taking care of their kids and were doing all these things in the home. So they already had that anatomy and they already were working. But the movement did not include black women. The movement was for white women. So now you go deeper and you recognize that yes, as much as they were fighting for women, they
Hmm.
weren't fighting for all women. They were fighting for a specific type of woman and a specific woman.
Yeah.
So that now in today's day and age, that is where intersectionality comes into place, because you recognize that although you are a woman, there are different things that myself as a black woman in Canada will experience that an African woman will not experience. So there's different intersectionalities of even feminism. So that's where intersectional feminism comes into place, because people that are differently abled have different challenges. People
Yeah.
that are of different genders have different challenges. So you have to understand that when we are talking about feminism, again, it is not against the gender. It is against a system that has been put in place to oppress, and a system that has been put in place to discriminate against your sex, your gender, your religion, your work, all these different aspects. So I think once we have a deeper understanding of it, we will be able to make greater impact. Again, this does not mean that everyone has that same understanding, because there are bad apples, in the bunch that end up, spoiling the whole bunch. So you also have to be able to check yourself. And this is one of the things that I say is that we all have conscious and unconscious biases that we show up to places in. So, for example, and we all have privileges that we show up in. So, I might show up at a place with a certain privilege that I would exercise in a way that might be oppressive and in a way that might be alienating to someone else. So, it really is in checking your unconscious bias and checking yourself every single time when you're speaking to people, when you're creating spaces for girls, when you're creating spaces for women, and really checking that and recognizing that in order for you to be able to create impact, you have to first deal with yourself, deal with your biases, be aware of your biases, be aware of your unconscious biases, and be aware of the things that is easy for ego to take over. So this whole conversation is so deep, and like there's so many layers to it. And
Exactly.
you know, especially on an African context, I find that we really a lot of times miss the mark on what empowerment is. Because if you are empowering someone, you're not to tell that person who they should be. You empowering someone is recognizing who that person is and giving them the tools and the anatomy to make decisions for themselves. So I never say that my work is to give a voice to the girls. They already have voices. They already have, an understanding of who they are. What we do is we amplify their voices and we provide them with resources and support that allows for them to amplify their voices even more. So you just have to be mindful of these things and be open to really having some heated arguments and conversations.
Now, one of the things that we keep talking about is, we are empowering the women, but we seem not to be doing same for the men, and so they are not at par. And so you have people, even as well educated as they are, they still have the toxic attitude. You get what I mean? And if they find themselves in positions, they try to push their personal ideologies concerning women empowerment within. At the position where they sit, where they sit.
Yeah.
So how do we balance the equation to ensure that, in as much as we feel women are being oppressed, and of course, the SDG goals are trying as much as possible to get organizations and individuals to work towards these things, how do we balance the equation for the gender?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I'm so happy that you asked this question. And, a lot of times I get questions about, power to girls. What about power to men? And the conversation, what I always say is this, is that, I started Power to Girls because of my personal connection to girls. I happen to identify as a woman, and it's easier for me to understand and be empathetic to the things that girls go through. Not to say that I can't be empathetic to the things that men go through, but there's certain things that men have to learn from men of honor, right? That I cannot necessarily teach. So I think it's really a matter of creating the space that allows for men to be vulnerable. Our culture in itself has not created that, right? Because if you look at it from, even when we are, from the way that we are raised, there's always, and you are the man of the house. Even when you have an older sister, there's already a responsibility that has been placed on the man that has not been placed on the woman. Because there's this idea that, she's going to be married and she'll be a part of someone else's family. And it is the man that is going to keep on, the family line and all these different things. And these are all traits of toxic masculinity. Because what you're saying to young boys is that they cannot necessarily respect a woman because she's going to be part of someone else's family, and a woman cannot do certain things. And this is the responsibility of a man. And, gender roles in itself is part of the issue. So I think the more important thing that we have to do is actually create spaces that allows for men to be vulnerable. And what that means is that allowing men to come into their true selves. So there's a lot of bravado and a lot of toxic masculinity, as I like to call it, that have been placed on young boys, and in a way that have also forced them to become men too soon. So, there are certain guys that they'll grow up hearing, Bemansu, men don't cry, men don't do this, men don't do that, men don't do that. So there's a lot of things that are bottled. Also have people that might grow up in, abusive households, and, they see, maybe their mom or whoever being abused, physically abused. And they grow up thinking that this is the way that I need to relate to women. This is how that I need to enforce my power. So there's a lot of different tidbits about that. But I think if we're able to create spaces that allows for men to be vulnerable and to really dissect some of these things, then we would definitely be on track, because we are also in an era and in a time where, men are speaking up, men are being very vocal about some of these things. The last thing that I'll say to is just holding men accountable and holding ourselves accountable. And this is actually not even just men, just holding ourselves accountable. So for me personally, I have male friends, and I would have conversations with them about, consent. I'll have conversations with them about, body shaming. I'll have conversations with them about, everything. And I happen to have two brothers as well. So this is always the conversation that we're having. But one of the things that I find that is very common is this idea that men are not allowed to be vulnerable. And that is something that I think they are very expressive about. It's like, oh, what do you mean? Like, I'm a man, I'm not supposed to do that. Like, so once we're able to really get rid of some of these gender roles that we've created, and recognize that there are things that a woman can do that a man cannot do. And this is not in a way to be diminishing or anything like that. No, it's just recognizing that in our own uniqueness, we have strengths and we have weaknesses. And coming together as one doesn't take away from me or doesn't take away from you. But once I'm aware of my strengths and my weaknesses, I can extend a hand out to someone else to fill in the areas that I'm weak, and then I can fill in for that person in the areas that I'm strong. So there's a lot of mindset shifts that has to happen in order for us to get here. But the last thing that I'll say is really around consent. And this is something that I hear a lot of, and this is not even just from guys. Like, this is something that even young girls have started to adopt, is that my no doesn't necessarily mean no, and my no means try again another time. No means no. And I think that understanding of consent and that conversation of consent in some cases is actually the root cause of a lot of things. Because what we're saying is that my words cannot be trusted. And what you're saying is that I'm not necessarily saying what I mean. So then that means that gives you the power to do with me as you please, or to do and to say to me as you please, which is not the case, right? So we really have to drill down on that conversation of consent and what it truly means. And in essence, when someone says no, male or female, it means no. It doesn't mean try to convince me. And it means no. Do you get it? Actually, I thought that was going to be the last thing, but this is going to be the last thing. The last thing is that women have anatomy over their bodies. Like, I realized that Africans are very touchy. They, like, our hands are always all over the place, and we always assume that if you meet someone in a certain space or in a certain regard, then you have the rights to their bodies, which you don't. And again, that brings back to consent. If you meet a woman in a club, you shouldn't automatically assume that because she's in a club, she wants to be touched, she wants to be grabbed. No, she is probably just out there to have fun and to enjoy herself. The best thing for you to do is to ask. So asking doesn't take anything away from you. When you might say, oh, it's not sexy if you ask, but actually it is more, quote unquote, sexier if you ask someone, can I hold you? Can I touch you? Can I kiss you? Can I do this? And when the person says no, then you recognize that, okay, you know what? No. And you have to respect that. The no doesn't mean convince me or come back and try again. No means no. So there's a lot of different aspects to this that, goes deeper than we normally have a conversation about, but we have to create the space to have these conversations. So I'm very happy that, you brought it up and that you created the space for us to talk about it.
All right, great. So for those who are watching us, this is CSR Lens, and I am talking to Aisha Addo, who is the founder of Power to Girls Foundation. Her foundation basically empowers young women to have their own voice. We have been looking at the impact that they are making in the lives of these women. She's mentioned that she has close to about 200 women that she's working with in Ghana and about 500 in Canada. And we are looking at the word empowerment, how to demystify the empowerment bit, because some people have a bit of a misunderstanding or misconception when the word empowerment comes up. It's almost as if we're asking women to stand up against the opposite sex, and that is basically not it. We're basically asking people to stand up for themselves, amplify their voices and be heard, and also be able to make decisions for themselves. This is where the conversation has gotten to. We hope that you are being part of it. For those who have joined us with your comments, Martin Vance and then Dala Football, thank you. Now, let's look at empowerment at the national level for Ghana. I know when it comes to Canada, I mean, it's a developed world. And so it makes it a bit easier to say that, okay, from a nationalistic perspective, things are moving on a bit smoothly. Women are taking up positions of influence. Women are doing a lot in terms of being part of the decision making at the national level and at every level from a corporate perspective and non-corporate perspective. Let's look at Ghana. What has been your observation and so far in terms of women inclusion in development at the national level?
Yeah, it's very interesting. And you know what? One of the things is like a disclaimer is that it doesn't matter like in every part of the world, to be quite honest, and like even in developed and still developing countries, the gender parity is still, is still quite large. So with the exception of like, some countries like New Zealand and
Mhm.
Sweden, stuff like that, but the gender disparity is still, a very there's still a big gap. So specific to Ghana, like, one of the things that I realized is that there's not a lot of women in, positions of power. So there are a lot of like, I think there is the hold on, like I was actually, a friend of mine shared this with me earlier on today, about just the number of, women that are in, politics, the number of women that are ministers, and the number of women that are deputies and stuff like that. Like
Mm.
it's it's decent, but we still have a long way to go. And the reason why I say it's decent is because, it seems like in this present government, there's a conscious effort being made to create spaces for women or to ensure that women are represented across board. But then
Mhm.
one of the things that I'll say is that, like, we shouldn't necessarily think about putting women in positions of power just as a way of tokenism. And what that essentially means is that you're putting them there just cause, right?
Yeah.
Women are smart, are as intelligent, as brilliant, in all aspects, right? So appointing people not just because you want to fill a quota,
Yeah.
but because you recognize that they are capable of doing the work that you've assigned them to. So I think that's really one of the key things that I want to talk about. The other thing too is that I realized that there's a lot of and this is even more from a societal, a Guinean society standpoint than it is government, is in the fact that we base a lot of our leadership decisions on
Mhm.
culture and not necessarily on, merit or on capabilities.
Yeah.
How many times have, you seen a woman, and this is not even just men, this actually is for women too, where you see a woman in a position of power or you see a woman get out of a car and you automatically assume that there is a man behind her that is actually giving her all of these different things.
I'm going to share an example with you. So,
Please.
I actually found myself around Parliament a couple of months ago, and I got out of my car trying to buy something, and I got a gentleman disrespectfully calling me, right? So, I turned and I said, "No, you don't call a lady like that. You walk to a
Mhm,
lady and then you ask her questions. You don't stand far away and
mhm.
say anything." And I just walked off, opened my car, and I had, "Oh, when you get the guys to buy you cars, this is how you behave." I was like, "What?" I just
Yep.
walked straight back. No, I took my time, walked straight back, and I gave it to him. I mean, to my satisfaction, I gave it to him. I said, "It's not every woman who drives who cannot afford her own car, or I mean,
Yep.
who necessarily have to give her body out just to buy a car." And that is the toxic
Yep.
narrative that a lot of men have, So that was just by I'm citing myself as an example.
No, absolutely. And this is something that we see a lot, right? So from a cultural perspective, we perpetuate that narrative a lot. And it's quite sad because what we're saying to younger girls is that you cannot have anatomy over yourself if you don't have quote unquote a sugar daddy or you don't have
Yeah.
someone else supporting you. So you would have women go through their education, higher levels of education, get their education, work hard, get their PhDs, get their masters, get all of these different things, and
Mhm.
have their accomplishments belittled to someone else. Like to me, it's always baffling that you would automatically assume that my worth is based off of someone else. And the funny thing is, it's someone else that you've not even seen, but someone
Yeah.
else that you assumed is playing a bigger role in my life. So there's a lot of like cultural understanding of, you know, women in leadership and women in, yeah, in positions of power. So we really have to think through all of those different things when we are having these conversations, because the reality is this, and this is something that I would like to say to, you know, men in general, is that you might not necessarily see it as, you know, an issue, or you might not necessarily think about it, and you might think about it and think, oh, this is nothing, but essentially, you know, in the future, hopefully you might give birth, you know, you might get a wife, you might, you know, decide to have kids and end up having 5 daughters. And
Yeah.
it's always interesting to me that you don't want to wait to learn how to treat women when you have a daughter. I
Oh,
think you should learn how to treat women now,
yeah.
when, you know, you are going through life, because your daughter is going to end up attracting someone like you. So
Mm-hmm.
if you are, you know, disrespectful towards women, and you are disrespectful towards their mother or your sisters or your mother, all these different things actually add up, and they will end up perpetuating and basically mirroring the exact same thing. So respect women and respect yourself. Like I it's just, you know,
It's
yeah,
just simple. All right.
absolutely.
Now, what has been your observation also? I mean, for me, sometimes when we push for, let's put women, let's give women the opportunity, like you've mentioned, it's not just about tokenism. It's not just about filling the sports, or it's not just about getting the international community to see that we are doing something, but then basically acknowledging the fact that these are women who have the qualification, who have done something for themselves and deserve to be pushed in these positions, and you believe that they will be there and effect change. Now, for those who have had the opportunity to have these positions, what's your observation about performance?
Yeah, I mean, to be quite honest, you know, there are people that are out there that are really doing the work, and then there are people that are out there that just have the position because they have the position, and that's the reality, right? But one of the things that I would like to say to that is that, you know, we always have to think about this cycle, right?
Yeah.
And that's the reason why I kept saying that, like, in as much as we want things to be perfect, there's always the bad apples in the bunch, right?
Yep.
So
Yep. Yep.
I always share that, you know, for women and even for men, when you get into positions of power, or where you get to wherever it is that you feel like you want to be, do not forget to look behind you and look at the person that
Yeah.
you can pull up as well, right? Because this idea that I have to be the only woman in this place is not healthy. Like it's actually not healthy. One, this idea that I have to be the only, like, you know what I mean, senior representative. No, like you always have to create spaces for people to join you along the way. And that is the reason why mentorship is so important and is so vital. Because if you're able to create a space and you're able to create a community that allows for people to learn and learn from each other, you're able to create a sustainable impact, right, in
Yeah.
every aspect of the work that you do. So I think that really that's really what it comes down to, is not forgetting to bring people along with you on that journey. um yeah, like really, that's, I think that would be what I'll say to that question in particular.
Okay.
In terms of, yeah, and also I guess this would be the last thing that I'll say on this, is that representation is really important, right? So when we look at diversity and inclusion, or even we look at, you know, ensuring that our workspaces or government, all these things, we also have to look at it from a holistic aspect, in the sense that how inclusive is our parliament system, right? So how inclusive is our government system? Like how inclusive are the people that are in positions of power? Because Ghana is not just made up of men. Ghana is made up of men, women, folks that are differently abled,
Mhm.
you know, all these different things. And are they represented in our highest governmental bodies? And the reason why I say this, and the reason why inclusion is so important, is because you're not making decisions for men alone. You are making decisions
For the
for the
environment.
entire nation. And the
Yeah.
entire nation does not encompass just men. the entire nation encompasses everyone. So you have to make sure that not only from a government perspective, at your place of work, all these different things, you have to make sure that it is inclusive of the people that you are serving. So that is, I think, one of the key things that, we have to be very mindful of and we have to look at.
Okay. Now, for your program, how do people get to be part of it? How do these women benefit from the empowerment? Will I say sugar that you are putting in the lives of people? I mean, how do they benefit?
Yeah, absolutely. So now, you can visit our website, www.powertogirls.com, to stay in touch with us and find out about our programming. We're actually going to be hosting an event in Ghana soon. It would definitely be this month. We just have to figure out when. So, that would be a perfect opportunity for girls and women to be connected with us. I think the other thing too is that for us, it's really like, we also have a helpline where girls can ask questions or talk to someone if they want to vent and stuff like that. So all this information is on our website, and is also on our our Instagram pages as well. So you're able to really just tap into it and get all the information that you need, really. Yeah.
Aisha, from your experience over the period, I mean, working on empowerment, what direction do you think, or approach do you think that people can take, or individuals like yourself who are embarking on this journey to ensure that the set targets are achieved?
I think the first thing that I'll say is stay true to yourself, and stay true to whatever your cause is, right? So that's like always the first thing that I say is that, like, ask yourself, why do I want to do this? What impacts do I want to create? And how can I create change? And what does change look like for me? So that's one. The other thing too is really just checking your own biases. So even myself, like, I have biases. I'm exercising a level of privilege that not many might exercise, right? So recognizing that as an individual, regardless of what background you might come from, you have a level of bias and you have a level of privilege. And it is really it's really on you how you exercise that privilege and how you navigate through that bias. So if you're checking yourself and you're being real and authentic to yourself, you would ask yourself, am I exercising my privilege in a way that is oppressive or creating barriers for someone else? And if that answer is yes, then you have to check that, right? And then also, what are the unconscious biases that I have that I'm allowing to influence my decision making, or allowing me to influence the way that I might show up or the way that I might communicate with someone else? So there's always kind of like there's always an introspective way that, for me personally, I look at things. Because I think if you're not able to be introspective with yourself, then that means that you leave room for everyone else to define you, and you leave room for everyone else to tell you who you are. But if you're being honest with yourself and you're being real with yourself, and you're asking yourself the really hard and uncomfortable questions, because being introspective is uncomfortable, right? But if you're able to do that, and you're able to do that honestly, then you're able to create change. So that's really, for me, what I would say is that, like, learn about yourself, get to know yourself, and be mindful of the things that you say, and be mindful of how you want to create change and impact in this world.
Great, great, great. Thank you so much, Aisha, for that insightful session with you. So over the period, we've been talking about how Aisha Addo, who is the founder of Power to Girls Foundation, is playing a role towards achieving Sustainable Development Goal 5. We talk about empowerment for women, achieving equality, gender equality for women, and gender equality, as well as empowerment for girls. And she's doing quite well in Canada and as well as Ghana. And she's talked about how, from a national perspective, we should look at things in terms of women empowerment, and why it is important not to just put women in positions, but also ensure that these are people who are qualified, who can develop the change that we're looking for in the various positions that they are put in. Aisha, do you have something else to add for us to wrap up?
No, honestly, thank you so very much for creating the space and for allowing for me to be able to share. This is something like a topic that is very, very dear to my heart. So I'm very grateful for the opportunity. And I always share that, like, my Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, all of that is always open. So if anyone has any questions or would like to connect with me after,
Yeah.
I'm more than happy to make that happen. So thank you so very much for the opportunity.
You're welcome. Thank you too for the opportunity to be on the show. This is CSR Lens. My name is Ohenewaa Brown, and this is where we wrap up on the show. Thanks for being part of the discussion. We hope that it did meet your expectation and you did pick a lot of things from the nuggets that Aisha has shared with us. Do have a good evening and happy holiday to all the workers and happy May Day. And let me just say that yesterday was exactly 1 year since we started showing CSR Lens. And we hope that we will be able to push this program forward and look at the milestones that we're looking at choking. Thank you and do have a good evening. Bye for now.